This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. Along to the Maroon and White pod, so semi-final weekend in the Senior and Intermediate Football Championships, and I'm joined by Justin Burke and Barry Cullinane to look ahead to the semi-finals. Barry, first off, something different under the lights Saturday night in Pearse Stadium this weekend?
Yeah, I I thought you were going to say something different in terms of the pairings. Yeah, something different in terms of lights, and it's brilliant. And like, I'm not sure is the plan to play the final under lights, or what the situation is. Is that why they're giving both teams a crack at both four semi-finalists a crack at playing under lights, just in case that does have to come to pass. But it should be an excellent occasion. In fairness, county semi-final, like, particularly, I know you'll be previewing this next week, but particularly county hurling semi-final day in Athenry was probably the highlight of the Galway GA calendar. So next weekend has a lot to live up to. But I think Saturday night, even chatting to a couple of guys that are planning on making a night of it, and I think it does add to the atmosphere. If they get good weather next Saturday evening, I think it'll be a really, really great occasion.
There is something, Justin, about Saturday nights compared to Sundays. It's sort of creating a buzz already this week, and we're only at Tuesday already.
Yeah, and I suppose the four teams that are in it as well, the fact the four of them top the groups, and you would have said at the beginning of the year they were probably the top four teams in the county, and they've gotten there, and the matchups, it should be a good evening of football, and the fact that it's a double header with both games on as well, rather than splitting one Saturday and one Sunday. I think there'll probably be a big crowd inside there on Saturday evening, and yeah, Saturday evening games, I'd always prefer a Saturday evening game than a Sunday afternoon game. Get it in and get it played and get it over and done with, instead of waiting around all weekend. So yeah, it's set up to be two cracking semi-finals.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, Justin, no surprises. Corofin obviously playing Salton Loughnacare, Tuam Stars playing Mike Cullen, exact same semi-final pairings as we had last year, and I think from the outset we all expected these four teams to be here.
Yeah, and they've probably got there comfortably enough. I know Tuam and Killannon or the other weekend in the quarter final, they probably struggled slightly, minus Brian Mannion. But yeah, they've been probably the four best teams all year, and deservedly all four in the semi-finals.
Barry, they have been the four form teams. I think it's safe enough to say throughout this championship.
Absolutely, throughout the last two championships, they've been the form teams, and it's probably a bigger question for a podcast over the winter. But it's where the actual future of football lies. Is it always going to be these big population centres that are going to dominate club football over the next 10 years? Because it's very, very difficult to see where the smaller, more traditional club breaks into that top four. We see how hard Uachtarard are finding it to make that step up. St. James's, and the age profile of all four of these teams is extremely good. So, it's as I said, it's a conversation for another night in terms of where the future of football lies in Galway, because we all have great memories of that kind of local, Killare and Caltra, all those great teams that contested and won. Cork and Shamrocks contested county finals, Milltown contesting county finals, and how difficult it's going to be for the likes of those clubs to come back and contest against what are four powerhouse clubs with big population bases. But yeah, they've been really impressive, and for me, the standout between all four teams is their conditioning in a lot of ways, and their ability to do everything at pace while keeping their skill set high and their decision making really, really strong. And we've known Corofin have been doing this for 20 years, but I think Mike Cullen, Sawtill, and Tuam Stars, they've certainly raised the bar as well, and the standard of the games on Saturday evening should be really, really high.
It's the difference there, Barry, when you look at these clubs maybe compared to the pack, and I know Killannon took Tuam obviously closely, but you look at all these four clubs, they're able to go deep into their panel. You look over at the Corofin management team, have someone like Jerry McGowan involved in the backroom team, Sawtill obviously, Finian and Sean Armstrong, players who played with Sawtill. Michael Neelan from Clare in with Tuam Stairs, Marky Q with Mike Cullen last year, obviously not with them last year, but they've been able to go deep into their panel and they've had impressive management teams over the last few years.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much Caroline Curran is doing with Mike Cullen either. You might be able to tell us a bit more on that, Paul. But yeah, absolutely. And just to mention Brian Mannion, like I think Shane McGlinchey only came on for Tuam, and a lot of the other clubs in the pack, I know James's were missing a couple of guys as well. I think Sam O'Neill, did Sam O'Neill start for James's in the quarter final? Was he missing? So I think,
He was missing, yeah.
yeah, so like if a lot of the other teams that are trying to chase, if they're down the likes of the Brian Mannion and Shane McGlinchey, it's really, really difficult to get them scores. Whereas, as you said, Mike Cullen, Sawtill, Corofin are bringing on guys that have probably played at a really high level, be it in college or for Galway, and that's just a testament to the work that's done at underage level, and the ability of the management team to bring them through at an appropriate pace.
Justin, as a Corofin supporter now, it's obviously county semi-final time this weekend coming up, but for Corofin supporters, is it hard to not think about past the county final and what could happen for Corofin this year if they are to get past the county final?
I don't know. I think because of the success that we've had, I mean, it only lasts for a limited period of time. There's going to come a time where we're not going to be in this situation. So I think you have to embrace every game as it comes. And down through the years, Corofin have a great tradition of winning semi-finals and of getting two semi-finals and winning them and getting over the line. Uh, the long and the short of it is semi-finals are for winning. I mean, all you want to do on Saturday evening coming out the gate of Pearse Stadium is to be able to turn around to the man next to you and say, I'm in a county final. So, and the fact that then I suppose the novelty of it being a double header under lights in Pearse Stadium, I think there'll be a big Corofin crowd in there. Um, the fact that there's been a lot of talk all year about Salthill and their county players, etc., and the matchups, potential matchups that we think might happen or might not happen. It's probably the tie of the championship so far, and it's probably the tie everyone wanted to see it, and maybe some people wanted to see it in the county final, but it's come when it's come, and I think Corofin supporters will be relishing it as much as the 35 lads.
Do you feel Corofin are being disrespected in some regard this year? Because obviously he's mentioned a lot of talk about Salthill. It's sort of felt since that Milltown draw that maybe Corofin before the Dunmore game were going nearly under the radar. They weren't being talked about as much.
I know. I think the workload that they've done since the championship started has been quite high. So I would say it was more that Corofin were timing their run. A couple of wins in the group gets you out. If they had gotten to a preliminary quarter final, they'd probably been happy enough to play an extra game, get minutes into lads' legs. Like they got minutes into Ian, Paddy Egan, Mike Farher the other day against Dunmore again, and I think they're just timing their run right. They had a couple of injuries early on in the year. There was a couple of lads away in the States. The lads in with the county took a little break after that and stuff. So I think I wouldn't say it was disrespect. I would say it was more Corofin were doing their own thing and they were getting their own house in order. And I know the workload through July and August, early September was quite high. So I think they've just timed their run right.
Yeah, this game obviously thrown in at half 7. It's the second game Corofin and Salthill Loughnacare. Barry, is now the time for Salthill Loughnacare?
Probably said the same thing last year, did we, Paul? I think I was on with you at a county semi-final today. But yeah, look, you have to you have to kind of judge everything in what's in front of you. Now, I will say they were good against St. James's. I don't think they were outstanding, and I always kind of games that are won by teams that score a load of goals. I sometimes wonder what happens if the goals dry up. And kind of had said this about to a few people about the Cork hurlers over this year. They were winning games, getting 4 or 5 goals. All of a sudden, the goals dry up and things become a little bit sticky. But on paper, what a team! And we've seen teams in the past. We could even talk about Corofin that may have had 6 or 7 guys on Galway panels, but you could always maybe feel there was only going to be 2 or 3 of them that started. Where with this Corofin team, they've 6 in the Galway panel. At some stage, there's every possibility that all 6 will start. They also have a mix of, we'd say, the likes of Carl Sweeney and Daniel O'Flaherty kind of as a defensive unit, John Maher in the middle of the pitch, and then Tomo and Rob and Matthew Thompson up front. So, like, there's pressure on them because of that, of the nature of that. And like, I know myself, I was involved with Thurlock Moore for a long time, and we had a lot of guys in with Galway, and that automatically puts pressure on you to perform. And Sawtell will know that they didn't this time last year. They didn't perform. I think one of the biggest tests that they will have is, did they address that? How they addressed it, and can they adapt their semi-final performance this year?
Do they carry last year's hurt in this weekend? Because like last year, I think we all talked them up. I think everyone in the county probably did, and they just didn't show up in Tuam Stadium. Do they carry a bit of that this weekend, or do you think it's just a blank canvas and you write it off and it's a new year?
Yeah, I'd say that they'll probably be saying about you're talking up Corofin's Connacht Championships chances, but
I never mentioned Connacht Championship, but
they'll be using that. They'll be using that, but no, there's no point in them carrying anything because that's just going to burden them. They'll want to have learned from it. I've no doubt that they will. I would imagine, if rumours are true about Kieran Donaghy's kind of access to their camp, I'm sure that's something that he will be looking at, is how can they make sure that they perform on Saturday evening? Because at the end of the day, they're coming up against an excellent team who will have their matchups nailed on. We're all thinking about that Liam Sale Crop Finnerty. Does that come as a Kieran Malloy or Dylan McHugh that picks up Matthew Thompson, Patrick Egan and John Maher? So if Corofin were to come out on top in those battles, that puts them a long way to go and win in this game. So there's no certainty in this game. But what Sawtell will be saying is that if we perform and we max out and we get bet, well then that's just the nature of it. But we feel, and they will feel, that if they perform and max out, they have a great chance of winning. But it's performance they'll be looking for.
What are you expecting, Justin, obviously, from Sawtell then this weekend? Last year, obviously, Corofin just did too much for them. They're obviously coming in. It looks like they're getting closer back to their full squad, fully strengthened. Like you look, Tom O'Cullan came back the last day, and he came off the bench. So it looks like they're getting close to their best team.
Yeah, it does, and I think Barry hit the nail on the head there. Like, what learnings have they taken from last year? And I'm sure they've reviewed the game at some point in the last 10 days or so, and they probably have picked out areas where they probably need to rectify a few bits. Like, they got 3-5 coming down the stretch without reply the last day, but James's were in that game until they got on that run, and that was in the 47th or 48th minute. So when you're coming down to crunch time in championship matches, you want your bigger players and your county players and your star men to stand up. And 3-5 from play coming down the stretch is fair scoring. And I think overall they had 4-12 from play, but I just don't know if they'll get that much time and space for goal chances against Corofin. And as Barry said, when a team relies on a lot of goals to win games and they dry up, where does the next couple of scores come from? Rob tends to play closer to goal, and we all know the threat that he brings. Is Tomo fully fit? Time will tell. Does Matthew Thompson get nullified, or does John Maher get nullified in the middle of the field? If Paddy Egan picks him up like last year, does he nullify him again? And that's a big bow or a big string gone off Saltill's bow. So I think the matchups are probably crucial. What learnings they've taken from 12 months ago, what they can bring into the game, and I suppose if the goal chances aren't there, what's plan B?
Does Corfin's record nearly stand to them this weekend? Like I'd say nearly every player in this squad, in this Corofin squad, has no experience of losing to Sawtell at championship level.
Yeah, it probably does to some degree, and I think getting everybody back from injury and minutes into lads, the likes of Ian and the likes of Paddy Egan and Brian Cogger came on the last day. He's been carrying a couple of niggles now. I know Jason pulled up the last day, and one or two others have been carrying knocks, but I think Corofin are relishing the challenge. They want to go and prove themselves against the so-called best team in the county, and they'll thrive on that. They'll thrive on that.
Barry, do you think Curfin's record? It's obviously Curfin are going to have no fear, and why would they this weekend? But it's even to think back to Salt Hill's last victory over Curfin in Championship, you would have to go back quite a while.
Yeah, look, it's a little Brian Fenton-esque, that run that you can go on where you don't lose is huge. And Corofin deserve, Kevin Johnson went in, probably took a year to settle and then put his stamp on things and put two championships in a row together with a team that you'd have to say, was looked for all intents and purposes in a lot of ways in transition. Now Gary Delaney's in there. Personally, I'm delighted for Gary. Like he's a Corofin man through and through, and so far things have gone outside of the Milltown game, but things have gone relatively according to plan, and he's bringing through a certain amount of footballers. And one thing I was thinking about today about Corofin is that, I'm as guilty as anyone of saying, well, Corofin, it's not the same Corofin team that it was 5 or 6 years ago, but yet they've two county championships put back to back. So at what stage do we turn around and in 2 or 3 years' time will we be talking about the likes of Dara Silk and these guys as up there with the best of the Corofin footballers that we saw put All Ireland titles back to back? And that's the level Corofin are at. So I think their record over Sawtill will give them a positive frame of mind, but the volume of work they've done over the last 3, 4, 5 years is what gives them confidence. And like I know how much they have done, and I know how much great work Michael Comer has done with them. And as I said, they're going to come in to Sawtill on Saturday evening, absolutely looing to have a good crack of Sawtill. And there's no better team and no better club to let everybody know that they were written off, and they would more than gladly put everyone back in their box.
Saltill's backline, if you look at it, Evan Wynn, Owen Dealey, Derek Neely in the full back line, Mark Mannion, Aaron Mannion, Carl Sweeney in the half back line. Is this weekend a weekend where they can't afford to leave Daniel O'Flaherty at wing forward?
I don't know, to be honest. I think the way they'll be looking at it is they'll be saying, like, they'll be trying to get the matchups and anticipate what Corofin will do. I think Corofin have strongly strong backs. So, for example, I'm not saying this. So, if Liam Selk picks up Rob Finnerty, if Cahill Silk, who I think deserve, like, what a servant to Corofin, he would absolutely relish a crack at Tom O'Callaghan if Tom was fit. If Kieran Malloy goes on Matthew Thompson, or Dylan McHugh goes on Matthew Thompson, it frees up then either Kieran Malloy or Dylan McHugh to go on Daniel O'Flaherty. And if all of those players get tied up, it's going to be really, really difficult for Sawtill to get a result. So I think what they might do is put Daniel O'Flaherty back in some way, shape or form to allow him kind of be their strike runner. Because as I said, if they get tied up by those absolutely fantastic Corofin players, they might be a bit devoid of ideas if they don't have a couple of strike runners coming from deep.
Obviously, the big matchups, Justin, for Corofin at the weekend, Matthew Thompson, Rob Finnerty, Tom O'Callaghan. It's probably not possible that Corofin are going to tie all three of these down, but they're going to be crucial matchups on the Corofin side of things.
Yeah, they will. And you're probably, I know we're guessing here now again, Liam is probably going to pick up Rob Finnerty. As Barry said, one of the two boys in the half back line is going to pick up Matthew Thompson. Then where does Daniel O'Flaherty play? I'm presuming that Paddy Egan and John Maher match up in the middle of the field. And, they're, as we were speaking beforehand, if 3 or 4 of those players get tied up for Salthill, again, what's plan B? And now it could happen that all 4 have the game of their lives and they nullify the 4 Corofin players and Corofin can't nullify them. And, we end up with an excellent game of football. But I think Corofin will do their own thing, and I think the matchups will probably fall Saltill's way. They'll probably try to predict what Corofin are going to do. And the Daniel O'Flaherty one there's a big question mark about that. I would agree with Barry that he would probably have to play in the half back line to be that link in that middle 8 where he can bomb forward. And then who tags him? Does Jason Leonard tag him? Does that take Jason away from his attacking responsibilities for Corofin? It is fascinating to try to predict who's going to pick up who.
It's interesting then to see what Corofin do in midfield because you have John Mayer, you have Michael Kitt, you have Niall Hano. There, 3 monsters there around the middle.
Yeah, yeah, and Paddy Egan is more than capable there. Probably one of the best young footballers I've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, and he's rightly in on that county panel, and I think myself it's only a matter of time before he gets there. But I think Bernard Power back in goal for Corofin is massive for their own ball retention off kickouts. Like Bernie has a wealth of experience there. He's cool, calm, collected. He can go left and right. He can go long and short. And it's a massive tool for Corofin to have him back, fully back, and raring to go. What Salthill do with their kickouts, he has a big boot of a ball. They're probably going to target that pocket of 3, 4, 5 lads. So if Corofin are breaking ball, it's probably who wants it more if that ball hits the ground. And I would imagine if Kieran Brady's at midfield, he's a big man too, well able to compete in the middle of the field. Kieran Malloy is good in the air, Dylan McHugh is good in the air. So, I don't think Corofin will overly fear the 3 big men in the middle of the field, but it probably is going to come down to that middle 8 to who wants it more if that ball hits the ground.
Barry, I know I've already asked you, is now the time for Salta, but for me, it has to be. You look at the 6 county players, you look at last year, uh, I suppose getting well beaten in that county semi final. Salt Hill just seem at the right age profile, and obviously a lot of discussion around them this year, certainly. But for me, I just feel it has to be this year.
So the question I'll ask you then is what happens if they get bet?
I think it's a big setback, massive setback. Like I think if you lose 2 years in a row at the semi-final stage, I think it'll be a big setback on their journey.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. Losing semi-finals is always a huge setback, but the reality is that they're coming up against a really, really good team, and whether they win this one and win a county final, or win this one and lose a county final, or lose this one, they're going to end up back next year in the exact same place as every other one of the 16 teams that starts out in the Galway Senior Championship. And they're at an age profile which means that more than likely they'll be one of the favourites for the Galway Senior Championship next year. But it will be difficult. And the biggest difficulty they will have is if they don't perform. And I know I'm repeating myself here. They will take it on the chin if they give an absolute exhibition. They play really, really well, and their tactical plan goes as well as it possibly can, and they just come up short because of the Corofin just have a little bit too much for them. So I think the manner of the defeat, if they were to be bet, is going to be more important than the actual defeat itself, because mentally you can only take so many scars without things starting to hurt. But I think they're there. If I'm Finian and Sean Armstrong and those lads, all I'm talking about all week is performance, performance, performance. And if they get that, they'll deal with the result after that.
How do you see it going, Barry?
I've said a few years I said once or twice that I feel like Corofin might be bet, and have in the strangest of environments have had Corofin players shove that down my throat when they've proved everyone wrong and gone on and won it. So you're back against Corofin at your peril, and I just think I have a funny feeling that they'll get their matchups right, and I think Salthill might run out of ideas. But saying that, I'm sure if it goes the other way, the Salthill lads will be quick enough to let me know I was wrong too.
Justin, I presume you can't see Corofin losing this one.
I just think that Corofin's bench and the impact that they can spring from the bench, particularly in that middle eight, I just think is probably a little bit more than what Salthill can introduce. And I think on a balance, I think Barry is right again. I think Corofin will have their matchups correct. And I think Corofin will be in the county final Saturday evening.
Yeah, I'm going to go against the grain there, and I'm going to go Salthill by 1. This could come back to bite me, but I'll go for them in that one. Looking at the other semi-final, Justin, like we're obviously talking here a lot about Corofin and Salthill not together, but is this the perfect situation for Mike Cullen and Tuam to be in?
Yeah, I think it probably is. And, it should be another cracking game of football if everybody is available and everybody is fit to play. I mean, if Shane McGlinchey and Brian Mannion are available for Tuam, it does strengthen their chances, and they're probably going to need them. Mike Cullen are probably that bit further down the road than Tuam. I don't know whether Peter Cook is available or if you have any info on that. I mean, if he's available and he's back, that's a massive plus for Mike Cullen. So I think as a curtain raiser to the other game, it should be a brilliant game of football. Tuam against Mike Cullen, 9 of their starting 15 scored. I know they left Killannon in the game, and they saw it out for a finish, but bear in mind they were probably down 2 of their better players, and Jamie Murphy again comes to the rescue. And Mike Cullen, no more than Corofin, they've been ticking along and they seem to be kind of coming right at the right time. They got 219, I think, against Uachtarard. It's fair scoring. They worked some nice scores. I saw some clips of it. They worked some nice scores. Their big men are still there putting the shoulder to the wheel, and I think it has the makings of a great game.
How do you see this one, Barry? Tuam will obviously have big regrets last year. Definitely had opportunities to beat Mike Cullen in that semi-final. Mike Cullen obviously down 1 or 2. Still don't know, is Peter Cook going to appear or not?
Yeah, I'd say even if you do know Paul, I'd say keep your powder dry. You've revealed enough about Mike Cullen this year to
You ain't going to let that one go. You have to get it in somewhere.
But yeah, I think the real battle. This is a very generic thing to say here, but I think the real battle in this one is going to be around the middle of the pitch. Like Mike Cullen are big. Even without Peter Cook, like they're physical around the middle of the pitch with the Paul Kellys and the likes Neil Mulcahy's. And I think Tuam might struggle here a little bit. And again, when you go back to matchups, like if in a lot of these games, it's who kind of runs out of players first when you're looking at matchups. And if Brian Mannion and Shane McGlinchey don't start for Tuam and don't start fairly, right up there in terms of their fitness, I think Mike Cullen will have too many matchups for them, and Tuam will run out of matchups. So that's the way I see it. But like, just to touch on Jamie Murphy, they've big leaders. Both teams have big leaders. Like you straight away for Mike Cullen, you're looking at the Sean Kellys, Desi Keneally, David Wins. For Tuam, Gary O'Donnell and Jamie Murphy, and I saw a WhatsApp group started up last night for a reunion for our under 21 All Ireland team 20 years ago, and Jamie was part of that panel, and he's still operating at a level, right up there in terms of any club footballer in the county. And Gary O'Donnell and Jamie are massive leaders, and I think if they can get the 2 lads on the pitch along with Grugan, Gary, Jamie, Brian Mannion, as I said, they're going to test Mike Cullen. Whether they have enough or not, I'm not sure. But I think this could be a really, really close one now.
It does definitely feel Shane McGlinchey would be a big one to have back as well as Brian, but just even you look at the midfield last day, it was Conor Heenan and Jack Cryan. Jack Cryan's only an under 19 still, and fair play to him for making the breakthrough. Conor Heenan's been impressive too, but as you mentioned, just to have McGlinchey out around that middle third would be huge for them.
Yeah, and they're missing their captain. His name forgets
Conor
me as well.
Radigan.
Connor Rattigan, that did his
Yeah.
cruciate earlier on in the year, and he's a huge loss for them as well. Like he's a big, he's a huge ball carrier. But yeah, I find this one hard to call. But I just think with the likes of Paul Kelly and Maloney and Nemo Mulcahy, I think the fact that they're now playing Johnny Maloney in the forwards is kind of a help to them as well. He carries the can a little bit. He helps out Paul Kelly in terms of that work rate and that carrying the ball and that link play. I have a feeling Mike Cullen will fancy their chances of getting to another county final. But like when we talk about records and we talked about Corofin players being confident against Salt Hill, like coming from Tuam and the pride that they have in their football, once they get to county semi-final stage, they could be playing the Grey Kerry team of the 70s, and they will fancy their chances of having a rattle off it.
It's felt like even for Tombstairs, Justin, if you're looking at it, that they've been building now for quite a while under Dave Donlan. Even early on the year, getting the league title was big for them because they came up short in those league finals the last few years. Even last year, they were very close to getting to the county final, and like even in over the last few years, Corofin have always had battles. It does feel that they're at a point now where they want the county final.
Yeah, they're probably on that brink where they need to take the next step. And I imagine the first step of that this year was targeting the league, and they seem to have went after the league. I know they brought Mikey Neal in from Clare in there earlier on in the year, and by all accounts, they're very impressed with him. A little bit old school in some parts of his coaching, but the players seem to have bought into it, and they're getting a tune out of it. But yeah, they're probably. I'm similar to Barry in this one. It's very, very hard to call. It probably depends who's on the pitch and who's available to take the pitch. Um, yeah, it's quite a difficult one to pick with Mike Cullen's experience. And Tuam have been knocking on the door for a couple of years. They've been in a couple back-to-back league finals, back-to-back semi-finals. You know, they're knocking on the door to try and take that step. But if Shea McGlinchey and Brian Mannion aren't fit or on the cusp of being close to 100% fit to get on the pitch if they're needed after 20 minutes and play it out, and that could be extra time as well if it goes that far, I think as Barry said earlier, it's who runs out of players first, and it's very, very difficult to call this one.
Do you think Darragh O'Rourke's the man to tag Desi?
I think he'll relish it. I know from talking to Ian, he's a tough man. He's a tough man marker, and he doesn't fear anyone. He soldiered a long time there. He's great experience. He's cute off the ball. He's well able to read the game. He would probably relish that matchup himself, in saying that Desi's in good form again. You know what you're going to get with Desi. He's going to kick the frees. He's going to lay on a couple of scores if he's given time and space on the ball. He brings others into the game.
Rory
So
O'Connor could actually be the option too, just after
yeah,
thinking
Rory
that.
O'Connor could be the option
Yeah.
too. Yeah, he could be. Or if Desi drifts, they might send Rory after him to try and let Rory up the pitch at some point as well. So yeah, the matchups in this one will be interesting also.
Yeah, if you're looking at Jim half back line too, Barry, obviously Niall Walsh and Johnny Maloney, obviously the two to tie down there, but even young Fiacre McDonough the last day won 4 from play against Duke Derry. He's been impressive this year too.
Yeah, and Fionn that's his brother, isn't it? Fionn,
Yeah, Fionn and Fiacre, yeah. prerogative.
He's been a big addition to them as well. But saying that, like every game takes on a life of its own, and Mike Cullen will also, Carl Clancy and his management team will be also looking to make sure, and probably Johnny Maloney will be tasked with this in a lot of ways. It's how do you nail down Gary O'Donnell and curb his influence on it? Because if he starts to drive forward and kicks a couple of, it's also some players that when they kick a point, David Clifford kind of a thing, Damien Comer, when they kick a score, it's nearly worth two. And Gary O'Donnell is one of those players to tune. Like if he kicks, you can visualize it already going up a trademark Gary O'Donnell down that right hand side, curling it in from the right. He kicks one of those early for tune. It just gives every player around him confidence, and that'll be a big task for Mike Cullen as well to make sure that his influence on the game is curbed. And if he was to have a big influence on it, then it'll go a long way to trying to get Tuam Stars into that county final.
Do Mike Cullen have, obviously, Sean Kelly? It'll be interesting to see whether he's 6 or 3, but it's interesting. Do they put him on Jamie Murphy? Do they put him back on Grugan? Um, Probably couldn't see him probably going back on Brian Mannion, just given Brian will probably play most in his corner. You probably would consider that Sean will be given more license to go forward, but it'll be interesting on that side of things what they do there, Barry.
I think if I was Mike Cullen, I would be saying that Sean Kelly does what he wants in a lot of ways. So if I was over Mike Cullen, and there are far too many great people in Mike Cullen for that to ever happen, but if I was over Mike Cullen, I would put Sean Kelly at 6 and encouraging him at every opportunity just to bomb forward and cause absolute mayhem, because no matter what defensive structure you have, even if Sean Kelly has absolutely no intention of getting on the end of the ball, once he drives forward, he has to be tagged and he's going to cause consternation. And I think if he does that time and time again, it opens up opportunities for the likes of Desi. And as you said, Fiachra McDonagh to kick scores. And I think Sean has the engine to get back, but he also has the football ability to cause pandemonium. And I think he'll have a big say in the outcome of this game on Saturday night.
Where do you see the crucial matchup here, Justin, when you look at it?
Yeah, it probably depends who picks up Jamie Murphy and who picks up Sean Kelly. Um, Now, in saying that, Tuam's inside line, with Grugan and McWalter in there also, they're going to take Mindon as well, but so are McDonagh and Desi. So those 3, 4, 5 players on either side there, they're probably your match winners. Um, I would agree with Barry. I would have Sean Kelly as one of my middle 8, and I would tell him go and cause havoc as long as he can get back. I think if Mike Cullen leave it open down the middle, Tuam can exploit that. So either someone is dropping off to allow Sean to go and cause that havoc. If he goes up the pitch, like 1 or 2 lads are going to get drawn to him, even if he's not going to get on the end of anything. If he goes and creates space and pulls lads out of the way for McDonagh and Desi to get scores, then he's probably going to be the crucial man for Mike Cullen. And it's who tags him and who can nullify him. Will be interesting to see. And on the same note, like Jamie is still going strong for Tuam. It's very, very hard at this point to imagine a Tuam team without Jamie Murphy in it. He's been going for so long, and if he gets nullified, it takes an awful lot away from Tuam. And if that happens, I think if the lads aren't fully fit, Mannion and Medlinchi and these lads aren't fully fit, then I think that probably swings it slightly in Mike Cullen's favour.
It's interesting here as we're talking, Justin. Tuam Stars haven't been in the county final since 2019, where they took Corofin to a replay. Mike Cullen obviously losing the last two county finals, and obviously eager to get back there this year and go one step further.
Yeah, and maybe when you spell it out like that might tip the scales in your thinking ever so slightly towards Mike Cullen. They're they're a bit further down the road than Tuam, but we're saying here Tuam are on the brink and they need to take that next step. So it's very, very difficult one to call. I'm still kind of 50-50 on it, to be honest.
How do you see this one going, Barry?
Yeah, 50-50, but probably as well. But I suppose we don't get the fee unless we call it, Justin, just to let you know. I'm going to go with my Cullen. I think there's a cause in my Cullen in that with losing Don this year as well. I think Kyle Clancy is a proud my Cullen man, and he will let them know that the Kennellan and the Clancy family especially deserve this performance and to give them a shot at that county final, and they will feel themselves that they have the players to go down as one of the great club teams in Galway football, and will probably have been disappointed over the last couple of years not to have got over the line against Corofin. And I think they'll certainly relish the task on Saturday evening, and they will relish the opportunity of having a really good crack at Corofin or Sawtail in the final.
I'm gonna go for Tuam Stars in this one. I think similar to Sawtell, there's a certain degree of now or never for this Tuam Stars team. Came close in the last few semi-finals. So I think they'll go one better. How do you see it, Justin?
I think if Mannion and McGlinchey are fit, I would lean towards June, but the fact on Tuesday we're not sure whether they are or not. I think the cause for my Cullen is probably just that little bit more. It's probably more hits home a little bit harder. I'll go with my Cullen by a point, but tentatively.
Just when you're looking at these semi-finals, do you feel this is the first time in a while, Justin, that you could say any of these four teams could win a county title?
Yeah, it probably is, and I suppose the fact that it's 2 years in a row, it's the same four teams back in the semi-finals. It's been a long time since it's been like that. And any of the four teams can win it on their day. A lucky break of a ball, or a ball comes off a post and someone puts it in the back of the net with a couple of minutes to go, and another team is chasing it, and you don't know what weather conditions you're going to get in October, coming towards the mid to end October. So yeah, I think it is a case that any of the four teams, if they got on a run, can go and win it. Yeah.
It does definitely feel, Barry, like it's obviously open these semi-finals, and it could be the first time in a long time where both semi-finals go right down to the wire here.
Absolutely, 100%. I'd say anyone in Sawtail on Saturday evening brings sandwiches, because they could be in for a long evening. They're very, very tight, and you'd have to say all expectations are that they're very tight. But what I found in this, and you go back to, I think was it 2 or 3 years ago, when it was talked about being the most open All Ireland final of our most open All Ireland championship in years, and ended up being a Dublin Kerry final. And traditionally, when we said this is a very open championship, Corofin have won it. So I think they're double county champions back to back. They deserve huge respect, and for me, they're going to take beating. I think if they're not, I think Saturday evening is the opportunity to take them out of it. But I think they're right up there. They have to be respected, and I think they could go all the way.
Just when you mentioned that, Barry, obviously no club thinking of provincial championships or anything yet. But for the Galway champions, obviously it hasn't went Corfin's way in the last 2 years. But do you think there is a chance this year that we see Galway champions push on when this turns into a provincial championship?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm not sure. They're coming up against really good teams. Like, you look at what Crossmalline are doing. Who's the Mayo final? Crossmalline and Ballina, is it?
No, they're semi-finals. They got pulled last weekend. Yeah.
Okay. Roscommon is Boyle were bet by Pierce, right? By
Bridges and Pierce in the Roscommon final. Yeah.
So like that's, to be honest, Paul, too hypothetical. Like, you're coming up against real quality. I just saw Boyle were well up against Bridget's, and Bridget's just ground out a result, and that's what experience does to you. And once you get down to the winter football, that counts for a huge amount.
How do you see it, Justin? Because obviously, even the last 2 years, we probably expected Corofin to push on and beaten by Roscommon opposition in the last 2 years. Is that a strength now, the Connacht Championship, or where would you see a Galway team potentially going?
It's probably very hard to call it this early out or early from it. I think it's Sligo. I think Galway champions play
Yeah.
Sligo, and like Cooler, Strand are back in the final in Sligo again. And they obviously still have the bit between their teeth to try and go back to back down there. So there's an awful lot of good teams left in Connacht. Those Mayo semi-finals should be good games. Pierce's and Bridget's in Roscommon should be another good game. So I think the Galway clubs are more looking at Saturday evening, and they probably won't get ahead of themselves until the time comes. Look, between all four clubs left in Galway, look, there's loads of quality there. There's loads of experience in all four teams, and there's no reason why they can't go on and rattle Connacht. But I think it's one game at a time until you get there, and you're into winter football then, and it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, it's Galway plays Sligo at home in the quarterfinals, the winners of Sligo, on November 8th or 9th, and then they play the winners of Leitrim in the semi-final, and it's Mayo London in the quarterfinal, winner plays Roscommon in the semi-final, then final 29th and 30th of November. Looking at the Intermediate Football Championship semi-finals, Corfin's second team take on Caltra at 2:15 on Sunday. Justin, from even having experience with the Corofin intermediates, they're surely fancying themselves now into the last four. People might say it's not the same because the second team, but I'm sure any player who's involved with the Corofin intermediate team is targeting a county final.
Yeah, 100%. And they have a great opportunity. They've put together some great displays all year coming through the group. They're very impressive against Glenamaddy. Probably rode their luck a little bit the last day, but grounded out against Clonberne. And there's some lovely footballers there. I mean, the majority of that panel are training with the seniors. It doesn't, despite the narrative around it being a second team, it doesn't go unnoticed what's going on. Whether that's in league matches and championship matches, and it's brilliant to see some of the younger lads, the likes of Shane Canavan, Killian Joyce, Finn McIntyre, and these lads, really get to grips at intermediate level. And you'd be hoping as a club and as a supporter that these lads can push on down the line. Oran Burke in goal, he's 24, 25, he's probably coming to his peak. He's probably just unlucky that Tom Healy and Bernie Power were ahead of him for so long. And the lads are still hanging around there, great servants to Corofin football, and still like Bernie rolls back the years every time you see him going out. And it's, yeah, despite it being the second team, I think they'll be happy with the draw, and I think Caltra will be happy with the draw because it's two teams that want to go out and play football.
Yeah, it's it's frightening in one sense when you've looked at a team throughout this championship. But in saying that as well, Barry, huge amount at stake for Caltra. They're keen to get back to this final after coming up short last year.
Yeah, and as we said, all four teams that are left in the semi-final, maybe outside of Corofin B, it'll be really good for Galway football if they go on and win it. No offense, Justin.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think for Caltra, I think the traditionalists and all of us, and maybe just my generation, would love to see Caltra back up into senior football. A bit like Dunmore, didn't transpire, but when we're thinking about Dunmore and Corofin, my earliest memories of football was in Tuam Stadium on Sunday evenings with Dunmore and Corofin classics, and Trevor Burke knocking lumps out of lads and John Donlan kicking points, and I'm sure there's a generation coming after that really look on that Caltra All Ireland success. So look, sentiment doesn't win anything, But yeah, I think I like the way on Spidgel play. I like the footballers they have. Liam Kelly, Anthony O'Lee. I had them at under 21. Brilliant lads, brilliant footballers, brilliant lads. But for me, I think Caltra will take a bit of beating in this one.
Yeah, even looking at
Sean
Caltra,
is Sean Kane is Sean Kane back for them? No.
yeah, Sean Kane's back. He played
Okay,
the
yeah. So he's a
quarterfinal.
big, he's a big boost to them. So everything is pointing in the right direction for them.
Yeah, particularly with Sean Kane and Alan Loughlin, they've two really free-flowing forwards there. Barry, they've got most of Caltra's scores throughout the championship, but they're two big threats for Corofin to tie down this weekend.
Yeah, with the likes of him, like at intermediate level, if you have a free scoring forward, it's very, very difficult to tie down. And Caltra seem to have a couple of them. So I think that should get them over the line. For me, I like Ballygar. Ballygar have done huge work. I think Jerry Kilcommons went in there as chairman and put in really good structures. And I know Joe Canny was down there for a while, and Brian O'Donoghue was down there, and they've everything is pointing in the right direction for them as well. But for me, my gut tells me it'll be an Speedgel Caltra final, and if it is, I think that could be one of the games of the year.
Yeah, obviously, big challenge for Corofin this weekend, Justin, coming up against Caltra. Caltra being tipped by many teams to go all the way this year.
Yeah, and they've been impressive up until now in their games. They're putting up big scores. I'm not fully sure whether Sean Kane is going to be fit or not. He came off the last day injured. Um, the narrative I heard is that he's unavailable, but again, I'm open to correction on that. But him and Alan Naughton, Keelan Murray in the half forward line there, they have some lovely footballers and they have a lot of work done. And Niall Kine has gone in there, and they're looking to get back there again. It's a big challenge for Corofin, but there's a lot of experience in that Corofin ranks too. And again, there's a strong bench coming there at intermediate level, and a lot of these lads are pushing to make that 26 and 30 for the seniors. And I have a sneaky feeling that there's a bit of a bit between the teeth with some of these Corofin lads in that intermediate group this year. Ronan Steed is back to playing the way he played 6 or 7 years ago. Glenn McHugh is coming. We mentioned Killian Joyce, Owen Brady, Tony Gill is still there, loads of senior experience, Barry O'Donovan. They're going to take a bit of beating too. And I think if Sean Kane isn't available for Caltra, I think that swings a Corfin's way.
It's interesting if Corofin B were to win this before Brennan's and Spittle go out. They'll almost be looking, and if they see the result of Corofin B win, it's almost winner of this senior football before county final.
Yeah, yeah, and it'd be a strange one. Way back when we were in an intermediate semi-final, I don't know, was it against Mike Cullen or someone inside in Pearse Stadium years and years ago, and it was the same narrative. Now we got bet on the day, but yeah, that narrative was going around beforehand that the teams coming after us knew they were going to be playing senior football if we had won. So yeah, it is a strange narrative, but you know, I think the Corofin second team probably don't get enough credit. They're slogging it out there since February as well. And while the senior team might get a lot of the headlines and stuff, for a club to have two teams in two county semi-finals, that's massive. And there'll be a big support in Tuam Stadium on Sunday for the lads as well.
Is there an element of pressure here, Barry? Like they're obviously coming up against Corofin second team, and no one wants to be beaten by any club second team.
No, I don't think so. I suppose it's a bit like Ballygunner. Like, is there pressure coming up against Ballygunner's intermediate team when they're absolutely stacked with hurlers, and same with this Corofin team. Like they've lots of guys on this intermediate team that have played for Galway at various different stages and have represented the Corofin seniors with distinction for so many years. So I think, to be honest, I think if it was maybe the B team of a lesser club, it's probably a little bit more pressure. But I think the fact that it's the Corofin Bs, I think it's just the game will be taken on its individual merits, and Caltra will know that they're coming up against a really strong, seasoned outfit, but they're hungry for success, and they'll just want to perform and get over the line.
You mentioned there earlier on, Barry, you see Culture coming out on top in this one?
Yeah, I maybe it's sentiment, but I'd love to see a Caltra, see Caltra back in a county final, and I think just as a pure footballing spectacle, I'd love to see them take on Spidgel and um, have a right good crack at each other.
And Justin, you see Corofin B coming out on top here?
I think if Sean Kane is unavailable for Caltra, it's a massive, massive loss. He's a key cog to them, but I just all week or for the last fortnight since the draw, I've just had a sneaky feeling that the bit is between the teeth with a lot of the Corofin lads that you want to have it in the intermediate team, and I'm going to go with Corofin by one, but just and I think if Sean Kane is available for Caltra, then maybe we can cut something in to say Caltra by one.
Yeah, I'm with Barry here. I just see Caltra edging this one at the weekend. Obviously they came up short in last year's decider to St. Michael's, and they'll be looking to get back there. But I think particularly when you look in the defence, Reen Henley Ryan's been decent. Luke Burke at centre back, a great man marker for them too. And then you look obviously in attack, Mikey Mulryan, Alan Octon, Oisin Butler, and potentially Sean Kane obviously up against it. The second game then on Spiddale, St. Brendan's. Um, both sides, Barry, here coming into this one on the back of impressive victories on Spiddale, defeating Corofin Shamrocks in the quarter final, and St. Brendan's going all the way to extra time, but just doing enough to beat Calstrand in the end.
Yeah, and I remember. I think I did was a Galway BFM kind of previewing the intermediate championship last year, and I was ridiculed by a couple of people when I said that Carl Strand will have a big say in this championship, and they did, and they'll certainly be really really disappointed not to have got over the line. That game might stand to Ballygar, to St Brendan's. It also might take a fair bit out of them in terms of mentally and trying to get a piece of work done between the quarter final and
Good
semi
few of them
final.
last week playing hurling too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just, yeah, I think on Spidger, I think like Anthony O'Lee is playing a really, really good brand of football. Like he's so creative. And I said Liam Kelly at the back. They've good quality all over the pitch. They've a really good club spirit, and I just see them coming out on top in this one.
If you're looking at Spiddle though, Justin, Liam O'Keneela, missed him the last day they got through it, but you feel like he's a player they need this time of year.
Yeah, definitely. Massive, massive loss. And they'll be hoping to have him, whether he can play 60 minutes or take some part in Sunday. They're probably going to need everyone. The O'Lees are flying 4-10, I think, or 4-9 between them the last day, massive scoring. Obviously there's a bit of telepathy there when the four of them are playing, they bounce off one another. I think the Brendan's game against Salthill or against Carlstrand will have taken a lot out of them. They might not be overly happy with their defensive performance. I think it was 13 frees. If you're giving away that many frees coming down the stretch in the championship, like Spittle are going to punish that. And I think on a whole, I think Spittle will be in that intermediate county final.
It's so interesting because you have so many scoring options on both sides. You look over at the Ballygar side, Rory Cunningham, Carl Healy, Paddy Downey have been racking up huge scores. Though Lees, as we've mentioned, with Spittle too.
Yeah, yeah, and I suppose going forward as an attacking team, I mean, Brendan's kicked 5-15,
Yeah,
5-16
by 15,
against
yeah.
Carla Strand, but you know, it's the defensive side of it where I'd be slightly worried, and with the pace and the support runners that Spittle have been, the style of play that they've played all year, I worry slightly for Brendan's. while they've come a long way, and it's brilliant to see them in a semi-final. And they're intermediate for a long time, and they have a huge tradition going back through the years. I just think that Spiddle just have too much. That there's too much about Spiddle all year. I can't see anything other than Spiddle winning the county final.
Just to mention Spittle there, Barry, you expect Spittle to get the job done?
Yeah, as I said, Liam O'Connell, he didn't play the quarterfinals, so he didn't.
No.
No.
So like I think if they can get him involved, if Liam Kelly can kind of tie down Rory Cunningham, I think they're halfway there, and I think that will depend on Anton O'Lee.
I feel like I'm going against the grain here a lot for both of you, but I'm going to go with Ballygare here. They've been my tip since the start of the year, so I'm not going to go against them now. That game, obviously, double header, the two semi-finals. Just finally, before we finish, lads, the intermediate relegation final. Clifton Gabriel's 1 o'clock. Loser of this, obviously, relegated to junior football. Gabriels were struggling up to now, but they got a performance in that quarterfinal, Barry, against Carrow. Clifton obviously pipped by Ormore Mary in the other semi-final, both competitive. It's one a lot of people, if they were looking at it a few weeks ago, would have said Clifton, but the fact Gabriel's got that performance now, that they're coming into this one with a bit of momentum behind them.
Yeah, like we talk about pressure. Like this is where the real pressure is, to be honest. Neither team wants to go back down to junior because they know how hard it is to come back up out of it. With the group or more in, they were probably unlucky in that they ended up where they ended up. But look, I don't know. I find this is going to be, these relegation finals are their dogfight. They're going to be absolutely impossible to call, and it'll be down to whoever makes the least mistakes on the day.
Yeah, they're two sides that went to the knockout stages last year as well. Um, Gabriel's getting to the intermediate quarterfinal last year against Michaels, and Clifton performing really well. So it would be a setback for either of these to be playing junior next year, Justin.
Yeah, it would. And this is probably the game that probably goes all the way and probably goes to extra time because there's so much at stake. And it probably will boil down to what team makes the least amount of mistakes, probably at the crucial times. It's a very, very hard one to call. I saw Gabriel's last year against Corofin up in Athenry. I was impressed with them on the day. Um, I saw Corofin's intermediates play Clifton in the league this year on Corofin, and Corofin gave them a nice trimming. Now, I know they were missing a good few lads on the same day, but this, no one wants to go back down to junior. It's a very, very hard grade to get out of.
Particularly for both of these clubs, they're not that long up in intermediate. Remember, Clifton's run a few years ago. Gabriel's were
Yeah.
only there a couple of years ago now, but still not too long ago.
Yeah, and this one is impossible to call. I think of all the games that could be a right humdinger and go all the way. This could be the one this weekend because probably from both teams, you're probably not sure what you're going to get. The season's gone up and down for both clubs. Gabriel's probably have a little bit of momentum coming into it, and they're probably a bit more seasoned at this relegation crack that they've been involved in it a couple of times. But I mean, who you pick here to win? I mean, pick at your pearl. I think it's very, very hard to call.
Yeah, I'm probably just going to give Clifton the nod in this one. How do you see it, Barry?
I'm going to go with Clifton. To be honest, primarily because I thought they were really, really, really good last year in the intermediate championship, and I thought they'd have a right rattle off it again. So I think it'd be very disappointing for them after what happened to them last year if they were to be relegated to junior, and I think they might just have a little bit too much for Gabriel's.
And Justin?
Yeah, I suppose it probably depends how many lads are available from Clifton from the rugby side of things. I know that's back on. I'll go against the grain and I'll go with Gabriel's. Just I don't know. There's something in my head says Gabriel's might just get over the line here.
Just then in the junior championship, Salton Knocknacarra and Annadown play in the primary two junior football championship semi-final in the Prairie on Friday evening. On Sunday morning, then Claregal and Tuam Stairs they play in the other primary two junior football championship semi-final, and then in the North Board and West Board junior football championship finals, Williamstown and Hepford. They meet on Sunday morning at 12 o'clock in Barnajarrog, and then at 1 o'clock in Pearse Stadium, Father Griffin's Aerogue and Carna Castle meet in the Westboard Junior Championship final. But that's all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks to Barry and Justin for coming on.